Hi everyone, Sandra Duran Wilson here, and welcome to this week's Mixed Media Soul Sparks. Every week we're going to explore different techniques, whether they're surfaces, paints, composition, design, ways to put it all together. And this week we're going to be looking at some different surfaces. Ampersand panels are panels that I like to use, and one of the reasons that I love them is that they're prepared with different surfaces, meaning that they're already primed and ready to go. They make them for different products. And this week, I'm going to be looking at, this first one is called Pastelbord. Now, you know I'm an acrylic painter, so I find ways to use things that are made for something else, and then I kind of adapt it to use with acrylics. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how you can actually use both. Now I've already prepared this panel. This is the Pastelbord, and you can buy these in white, there's a gray, and I think a green or a tan. And if you're a pastel artist, then you know that you would be using different colors for your pastel work. However, the surface on this is what is unique. It's got a tooth, meaning it's kind of scratchy, that it's going to hold the surface. But it's also beautiful for acrylic paint, as you can see. Let's just do a really quick, well, let me just use this color, put this out. And it's really, it almost feels like a kind of a velvety texture to it. And you can see how beautifully it holds the paint. Now this paint, a lot of water on my brush, and if you had another surface that was really glossy, this paint, this very wet paint, would bead up. And yet this surface holds that very wet paint beautifully. Now you could come back in and let's just get a little paper towel here. Even as I wipe this wet paint off, you can see how much of it stays in this surface. So that is, for me, that's a great surface to work on. Now, I got a little bit, it's so scratchy that you can see right here, it's almost a little bit of that paper towel came off. So that's the tooth that it has. So if you want to keep building this up, you can add more layers, just kind of like how I did here. Now, let me just show you. Now that this is dry, it still has the tooth. It's got quite a bit of paint. It's not super thick. You don't want to kind of change the surface by adding a lot of gel or paste. This is just straight paint. There's no gels or paste in it. But now I can come in here with, these are pastel pencils, and do you see how beautiful it is? I can just come in here and draw. I can bring in some of these different blues, you know, draw shapes, and then I can use my finger to kind of push this around, blending, you know, your pastels. Now the thing about pastel is it sits up on the surface, whereas the acrylic paint, it goes down into the surface. But if you're using pastel, when you're finished with that, you're going to need to seal the pastel so that it doesn't rub off. And I like to use Krylon workable fixative. One thing, it will make the pastel just a little darker because it's setting it. So follow the directions on the can. I like to spray it outside, but it's just really fun how you can just start to get some kind of details in here with the pastel after you've painted your acrylic background. Okay, so that's the first one. That is the Pastelbord. The next one I want to show you is called Encausticbord. They developed this particular product to work with R&F encaustics, and it's a little thicker, you'll notice if you have different panels, than the other ones. And they made it a little thicker so that it can take the heat of working with encaustics. But this is my favorite mixed media panel to work with. And I like it. It's a little smoother than the Pastelbord, yet you can still get an incredible amount of paint. You can throw things, I mean, you can, scrape it back, collage, add the gels and paste to it. It's whatever you want to throw at it. And here is, again, the same paint, very wet paint, but it's not beading up. It's going into that surface. And if I wanted to come back and sand something back or braid it, add lots of layers of gels and paste, it's the best mixed media board. However, you can also use encaustic on it, and that's what this is. So let me just show you. Now that's wet, I can't work on that, but I'm going to come over here, and I'm not going to work in the traditional way of working with encaustics. I'm going to show you a couple of little tricks here. Now these are encaustic from R&F Encaustics, and if you were painting with it, you would melt these down, and then you would be using heat to get this on here. I actually do encaustic printmaking, and it's another way of working with these, but I'm going to show you just a quick little tip here. And I'm just going to use the heat gun. You can see there's some purple on there, so I'm just going to use the heat gun to just heat this up a little. Not yet. There we go. I'm going to get a smaller one. This is just a wax marker. It's going to heat up faster instead of that big bar of wax. And I can just come back in here . Oops, I melted it. These are some smaller ones that I've made. The idea with encaustic is you really need to fuse this to the previous layer. So once you get your wax on there, then you're going to want to heat the whole thing to kind of fuse it to that surface. Do you see how it's liquid now? That's what you need to do. And then if I came in with a different color on top of that, I think this is a bronze, then you're going to need to get the two of them liquid so that they blend together, like that. So my favorite panel to work with, Encausticbord. Now you can get the flat panels like this, but you can also buy them cradled, meaning they have the sides on them. They're a lot less expensive when you don't have the cradle, and easier to store, if they're flat. The other thing with the encaustic, I can come back in with this little knife or a little point, and I can scratch back into it. Everything you could do with regular encaustic, that's what these panels are made for. So you can put the encaustic on top of a thin layer of acrylic. Let's take a look at this third one, which is Scratchbord. Now I have demonstrated, how to use Scratchbord. It's a drawing technique where you're actually removing the ink. What this panel is a clay board, and I'll be exploring that surface in another episode. But the clay board is very absorbent, super, super smooth. No tooth to it, so to speak, but it's very absorbent because it's clay. And then they put a coat of India ink on the top. So scratchboard artists are drawing basically using a stylus like this and different tools, removing that ink. However, I said, I want to find out what else I can do with this because the black surface is very beautiful. Now if I come in, let's just try a couple of paints here. This is a green gold and this is Naples yellow and a little Holbein white. This particular white, this Holbein white, I like it because it's more opaque. So anytime you're going to put something over black, you're going to need something that's somewhat opaque. I still have some of this blue, but when you put the paint over the surface, over the black, it's very intriguing, I think. Now, do you see how it kind of moves and beads up a little more? It's not quite as absorbent as the past two surfaces, but it's still staying on there. It's putting a little green in here. And this is thicker, so you can see that the thinner layers are going to give you a different feel than the thicker layers. Now, while this is wet, I can come in, a little alcohol, and when I spray the alcohol makes the paint move away from the alcohol. And I can dry this a little. Let it run. While this is even wet, I can come in here and start to easily remove paint and clay. But when I come back in and I start to wipe some of the paint off, I find this kind of interesting. Because some of it stays and some of it comes off. Let me try that again. I'm just beginning to explore a lot of different ways of using this scratch board. So I'm sure I'll come up with some different ideas here. And it's a very interesting surface because working on black, you might choose a different palette. Now if I wanted to get some of that off, I'm just going to put a little water on here. And you see how easily that cleans up. So this is the first time I've started really playing around with the scratch board. And I'm going to probably come up with some other ideas of what I might do with this, and I'll put it in the notes. And I'd like to see what you come up with the scratch board. You can make your own. If you have the clay board, you can just put the India ink over it, but you can just buy it already made like this too. So try some new surfaces. You can buy these small 5x7s and just kind of play around with them, and let's see what you get. So I'll be putting some notes and some ideas with this, and I'll see you next week. Join the Creative Awakening community on Facebook, where you'll be able to post your art, connect with other creatives around the world, and ask questions. Use the hashtag MixedMediaSoulSparks when posting your work on social media. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week.